Hi people out there, we're glad you're watching us. Welcome to the interview of experts to the Cradle to Cradle Building and Architecture Alliance. As a network platform, we are willing to make Cradle to Cradle to a matter of course in the building sector. We are looking forward to talking to Louis Perkins, Director of the Products Innovation Institute, with whom we are going to talk about the Cradle to Cradle certification standard. Nice to have you here. As I said, you are the president of the Products Innovation Institute in Los Angeles, a non-profit organization that educates and empowers manufacturers of consumers' products to become a positive force for society and the environment, helping to bring about a new industrial revolution. Those are the words on your website, which I think are big words. So, why did you decide to go for Cradle to Cradle, to do more than just sustainability? And what is this new industrial revolution for you in the civil engineering context?
Excellent. Thank you for having me here to talk with you today. So we are based in California. We also have an office in Amsterdam as well, too. And we work with companies, manufacturers across both Europe, US, as well as other parts of the world. And now we're really expanding our scope to other influencers in the Cradle to Cradle universe. Our role, as you said, at the Products Innovation Institute is really focused on ensuring that products going into buildings are made with the highest integrity, which to us is around safe materials that can be perpetually cycled with positive impact on humans and planet. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the way I got into this work was that I was working in the sustainability world. I was working in the built environment for a flooring manufacturer, and I was out there going to conferences and meeting with companies and speaking and seeing how the landscape of sustainability was really developing from a corporate perspective. And so often it was really utilized as a competitive advantage from a marketing standpoint. You know, we put solar panels on our manufacturing facilities so we're green, or we, have a styrofoam cup recycling system, or we even use styrofoam cups, or we've replaced them with coffee mugs, or and then therefore we're this huge green company, and then everything else that was happening inside the product design, the way companies manufactured, and really their values didn't align at all with sustainability. And even the word sustainability itself was sort of like, what are you sustaining? I mean, are you trying to sustain the current system because it's not working? We're facing planetary limitations of products and materials, of resources. We don't want to sustain this. We want to create something completely new and beyond sustainable. We want to create a new model, and we want to sustain the new model, So for me, I felt after several years in the space that I was hungry for something that was different and something that was meaningful. And I could no longer sort of settle for, just having a job and getting a paycheck based on, talking about green and sustainable if it really wasn't making an impact. So I read the book, Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. My CEO at the company was an advocate of this work. He handed me a copy, and I read it and, had kind of the revelation that I think many of us have when we read the book, because for me it was like reading the truth. This was not a new thing. It was just like somebody had written down the truth, and I was reading it. And for me, that was pretty powerful, because that's what I was seeking. I just wanted to work and spend my life and my time and energy and intelligence and resources towards making a difference. So pretty soon after that, I met Michael Bromgard and Bill McDonough, and started talking to them, and they were talking about launching this Product Innovation Institute and how they would take the Cradle to Cradle product standard and move it over to this institute, and it would be charged with the governance and the growing and the expansion and branding of this work. And so I stayed in touch with them and the board of directors that was being created, and 2 years later, I started working there. And then I became the president 2 years ago. So I've been there for 5 years now. And then to your second question, really around sort of the civil engineering and this work within the building space. Since I came out of the built environment, we're looking at flooring products, and that Cradle to Cradle also was highly embraced and esteemed by the building community, particularly the green building community, it was an easy leap to really focus on how circular, safe, healthy materials going into buildings would then become the asset of a building as a material bank. And so this is the concept that we've been building on at the Institute. In the U.S., being able to ensure that our program was being written to the LEED standard. Now in Europe with DGNB and BREEAM and other green building standards in countries, UK, the Netherlands, being able to ensure that a building is built with cradle-to-cradle certified products is our goal. And so that's what we've been really focusing on.
Before being president of the Product Innovation Institute, you were also president of Sustainable Strategies for the Mohawk Group. What makes C2C to a very special sustainable strategy?
Yeah, and I think expanding on what I was saying a minute ago, to me, it's the simple language in Cradle to Cradle that makes so much sense. The elimination of the concept of waste, the production of products with renewable, available, clean energy, and the celebration of diversity across the supply chain. To me, those three sort of guiding principles of Cradle to Cradle are so simple and so elegant. And then based on that is this concept that less bad is not equal to more good. And what we're really talking about is building a system of more good. And to me, when you envision the concept of a manufacturing facility that's making a cradle-to-cradle product, all of the chemicals, all the products and materials have been vetted to be safe and healthy. The water systems are circular. Water coming out of the factory is, in fact, cleaner than it is going in. It made me imagine that in certain parts of the world where there was either water scarcity or availability of potable, clean water, that you could potentially have factory workers filling up jugs of water to take home to their homes for cooking and cleaning from the factory because it was cleaner coming out than going in. Or that potentially we're asking manufacturing to increase renewable energy. We start that with investments in renewable energy projects or through credits, but ultimately it's about making sure that the factory is run with on-site renewables. And as we start to envision that, imagine a facility that's making more energy than it needs and it gives it back to the grid in a local facility. And then in that developing nation, you might have more energy than you had before. And then that you celebrate the humans that are working with fair wage and with human rights and education and women in leadership. And all of a sudden you think, wow, now I have a facility that's producing and creating cleaner water, producing and creating cleaner energy, producing and creating cleaner, happier, educated, well-paid lives. Then you're raising your hand saying, can you please put a manufacturing facility in my backyard? Because this is going to be great for everyone. And that's not what we've been saying for the last 50 plus years. We've been saying manufacturing happens in areas where there's poverty, where there's low, we don't place those facilities next door to the wealthy neighborhoods. We move them out to areas where, if it leaks into the groundwater or, there's some effluent getting out or smoke coming out of the system, that's okay because it's on that side of town, And I think that to me was this just powerful equation of a cradle-to-cradle production, a product, a facility is going to be so much better for everyone. And with that, then you remove this whole concern that production and consumption is a bad thing. Because if you're making things in a healthy, safe, and clean way, and by the way, the product itself is designed for continuous material reuse, so it can go into future cycles of materials over and over again. This is like value. This is an asset, And to me, that just was a completely different paradigm than anything I had heard around sustainability. So, that to me was like, sign me up. I will definitely spend my life working on this.
I think you did very good going that way. So you have put a lot of your energy in nonprofit organizations too. The spectators might be interested in one happening that occurs when you were very optimistic about your future, but also in a situation when you thought, why am I doing all this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have this interesting timeline of the last 20 years of my life and career where I didn't always know what I was doing. I started off in nonprofit, working in the art world. I was very interested in history and art, and so I worked in museums, or one museum when I first got out of school. And for me, that was because I was very interested in what humans create, and I was very interested in that art is a reflection of the times in which it was produced. I think products are the same thing. I think the clothes we're wearing, I think the way we design our homes, the colors of the blankets on our bed, all this is like personal. It reflects our human taste, our style, our design aesthetic. And so there's kind of a connective thinking that I already had started thinking about around beauty and around style and design that had stayed with me. But then after a couple of years, I was working to help bring money into these organizations, and I was talking to corporations to try to get them to write checks so that we could sponsor these art exhibitions and these big shows and such. And I was struck with how they would write a check to support something, but then the other side of their business might be making a product that had, high fructose corn syrup, or it might have, endocrine disruptors and, all kinds of negative issues, or you would read about some of the labor issues in their production. And so I was really interested in like corporate social responsibility versus corporate philanthropy and how they seem so disconnected, and that many, many companies would write checks and call that corporate social responsibility. But meanwhile, all their activities and their products and everything was so bad. So for me, it was like I decided I would go to business school to study because I had this sort of art nonprofit background. But I felt like I didn't have the real understanding of business and how business worked. And I felt that my aspirational ideas that we should live in a world where everything was so harmonious and beautiful was maybe naive. So I went to go interview for business school. And I remember during the interview, they said to me, okay, why do you want to come to I went to Emory Business School, Guizueta Business School in Atlanta, Georgia. And they said, why do you want to come to this school? And I said, well, I want to help companies find their soul. And I kind of had borrowed that expression from a book I'd read, but I didn't really know what I meant by it. I just knew that was like, that was my goal. Companies should find their soul, And so I did. I went on and got this MBA, and then I left and I did consulting and technology and help companies build websites and do tech strategy. And after about 5 years of that, something in my heart kept saying, what about companies finding their soul, And it was lucrative. I mean, consulting in that space was lucrative in the early 2000s, and yet I knew it wasn't right for me, and so I knew I had to get back to the nonprofit world, and that was, I think, the sort of moment for me when I was thinking, do I chase after a career where I can make a lot of money, or do I really listen to this part in my heart that is saying, you're not happy if you're not doing something that's aligned towards your original intention of, helping companies find their soul. So I went to go work for a nonprofit again, focused on air quality issues. And we worked with a number of metro, Atlanta, Georgia. We worked with a number of metro businesses to help them with transportation issues, to mitigate the risk associated with exhaust coming off of cars, to eliminate cars on the road. It was all around improving air quality. And in that's where I kind of came into the sustainability world, and it led me to go work at Mohawk in the product manufacturing. But I went through the same thing at Mohawk when I got to that point that I described earlier, where I was seeing greenwashing everywhere. I couldn't do that, and so my journey has been one which is not always easy, because whenever I feel uncomfortable, or I see something that's untrue, or there's a lie in the system, or people are misleading, even in some of the best intended movements like sustainability, I got to raise my hand and say, wait a minute, and then I have to shift. I have to shift. And so I think my experience of having sort of the darkest moments in my career, or where I would go, is when I realized that something inside of me was saying, this isn't right, and you're going to need to have to move again. And there was this poet named David White who had made this statement about how life is like a home where you're buying a perfect, comfortable chair for the corner so you can read your book, and you're getting the perfect, cozy carpet for your living room. And just when you find that right painting that goes right in the corner, or that you have that blank wall, and you're nailing the nail in the wall to hang it so you can say, I have everything the way that I want it, inevitably you get this knock on the door that's bam, 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 and it says, pick up your stuff, it's time to move, you got to get out, you know. Life is a continuous series of awakenings and a discomfort, and then you have to change and go to the next level. And I think for me, what I've learned is every time I have to pick up my things and move to the new house, it's always bigger and has more space for everything I'm bringing and everything new that I'm going to acquire. And that was something that I got from this poet, and it really has stuck with me all these years, because we can't be afraid of change. And that's what this whole movement is about, is being comfortable with the uncomfortable and then moving forward anyway.
We are still not able to build perfectly cradle to cradle. That's why we, as a Cradle to Cradle Building and Architecture Alliance, want to foster the development of such a building. Therefore, we would like to ask you, where were your toughest challenges and how did you handle them? And what are your next steps?
Yeah, this is a great question, because we just developed this initiative this past year called Built Positive, and it's for the building sector, and we developed it because we recognized that individually improving our products and certifying them as cradle to cradle was great, but there was no cohesive collective plan, and the argument to the architect or the designer or whoever was specifying products for a building project didn't really have the bigger picture of why these products all assembled together would create not only a healthy environment because of our material health assessment of everything going into the building, but that it would also presumably begin to create value in materials that could have a next life. And so even though a product was designed with the intention for circularity, didn't mean that we were positioning the products within the context of a building as a circular building. And so we met as a team, and we interviewed a lot of the manufacturers of furniture and flooring and paints and tile and lighting and companies that we work closely with, window shades and all these wonderful products that have been certified. And we said, what would it look like if we created an initiative around the larger context, the larger system of building as material bank, with cradle to cradle certified materials as puzzle pieces to these buildings, And so the hardest part, I think, for us is we're sort of in it right now, because we've proclaimed that we're having this conversation. We're assembling not only the manufacturers, because that's easy in some ways because they've already made the commitment to cradle, but we want to recruit more. There's certain things we're missing. If you asked me today if you could design a building with 100% cradle to cradle certified materials, the answer would be no, you can't, because there's certain categories of materials that we're missing. Or it would limit your design because of that reason. So therefore, what we want to start doing is looking at how do we create a materials library, a product library for an architect, designer, or specifier of products that is thinking holistically about the whole building. And that means it's not just each individual material and its cradle-to-cradle sphere, it's the collective of how all of these products have value and can be retained and disassembled and moved into future systems. So we've now also assembled a wonderful list of owners, building owners, developers, architects and designers who are working with us, real estate developers that are working with us in early dialogue on how to create the framework, the context, the curriculum, video tutorials, best practices, everything as to how we do this. And it's hard work because we're really kind of creating this discussion from scratch. The good news is we've got partners out there like Delta Development in the Netherlands who've done the Park 2020 development, which is a cradle-to-cradle inspired commercial community boasting the highest number of cradle-to-cradle products. They've done a lot of valuation on the materials and what makes sense so they could make a business case. Utilizing their wisdom and knowledge as a partner has been helpful. And then reaching out to other best practices like the Buildings as Material Banks initiative from Horizon 2020 and other developers that are working in this space. It's important for us to make sure that we're not necessarily trying to recreate anything as much as we're trying to bring the best practices together. So I would say the biggest challenge for us right now is to really clearly define and articulate the value of these buildings, because ultimately what it's going to mean is changing the way we think about buildings, changing the relationship we have to them. And those who are making money on the current system of build it and potentially tear it down in 50 years, or we have to start thinking about these buildings for a longer term, and that how the ingredients or the components inside can be reutilized as we turn the building from residential to commercial to retail to office, however we're transforming buildings without creating so much waste.
Thank you very much, Louis Perkins, for joining us today for this interview. We wish you all the best for your future. But last but not least, we want to give you the chance to give the audience some good advice that you would like to have at your beginning of your cradle-to-cradle path.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that it's the beginning of my cradle-to-cradle path, and maybe even the beginning of my, my career and my adult path of, what I want to do with my life. I think the biggest advice that I have is to listen to what you really want to do with yourself and what you believe passionately in. And even if it's not going to make a lot of money, or even if it's not going to win you a lot of prizes, or even if it's not, we have to continuously sort of reset ourselves back to what's in our heart, what's in our passion, and connecting our vocation, our avocation, and our passions. And I mean, you hear this all the time from people, but it's to me, it's always been true. And I've never regretted, even when it seemed crazy to quit a job, move across the country, go do something else because it didn't make sense to just pick up and disrupt. I've always been grateful for listening to the wisdom and being not afraid, but having the courage to really believe that my life is useful when I apply it to the things that I'm passionate about, because that's when work becomes joy.